Alrighty. And I think that's just about time. It's hit 2 o'clock here in Brisbane. I think it's 3 o'clock in Melbourne. And we're here for the last in our series, our 2021 reflection series. And I'm a little bit sad about that. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to everybody who's watching this a little bit later. As an insolvency practitioner, I do like to look at the learnings that come about from businesses or ventures that might find themselves in distress in order to advise others on how to attempt to mitigate against making similar mistakes in the future. And in the same vein, I like to look to my colleagues, contacts and friends to hear what they've learned from their different experiences, as I think it builds towards a wealth of knowledge. And this is why in this series, I'm talking with a number of esteemed and accomplished individuals to see what 2021 has meant to them, the lessons that they've learnt, and what might be ahead for 2022. Today, I'll be speaking with Nathanael Kitingan, Managing Principal Lawyer for Victoria at Macpherson and Kelley, and I'll bring Nat in now. Welcome, Nat.
Hello, Alice. How are you?
Hello, I'm well. I'm very well, thank you. So we've almost made it to the end of 2021, and it's been a year. Looking from what I've seen, you've had probably a bigger year than most. You're now, from this year, the Managing Principal Lawyer of the Melbourne office at Macpherson Kelley, the President of the Australia-Malaysia Business Council for Victoria, and you've also recently got engaged. So pretty big year.
Alice, it's actually been strangely a good year for me in that, if you're talking about personal milestones or good things that have happened in my life, primarily getting engaged, of course. I think that's my highlight, which is quite fresh. My fiance Michelle, she's awesome, and yeah, these all happened in the last 12 months during the COVID. So I took up the reins of the Melbourne office here at Macpherson Kelley. It was certainly a challenge, but it's been really good and rewarding personally. And I also was elected president of the AMBC, which I also participated on the side in August. So yes, a few things that have happened for me personally.
With all that free time, I was also going to mention that the Legal Wise presentations that we did together, but I didn't think that sort of had as much importance as everything else that I had on your list.
Well, that was earlier in the year, wasn't it? It was
yes.
when those the reforms of the small business restructuring reforms just came out, and we were sort of,
that's right,
what's going to happen? And yeah, we were thinking about doing a follow-up, weren't we?
We were, yes, we should probably. Done. Oh, well, there's not been a lot to report on.
No, well, that's the thing. It was much to do about not much.
No, but that being said, I must admit, in the last couple of days, I've noticed that there've been a couple of restructuring practitioner appointments which have come about just like literally in the last week or two. So they'll be quite interesting to watch as well. Yeah, one is of Kindling, which is the kids radio station, which my kids love to listen to. So hopefully that'll comes around.
I hadn't heard of that one.
Yeah. So
well, I think practitioners have certainly learnt how to, that would have learnt at least how to manage their fees and costs when accepting these appointments, and how they might work for certain small businesses. But we certainly haven't seen that tide of appointments that the government anticipated when they rushed through the legislation at the end of last year.
Yeah.
But
so
hopefully it finds a place.
Yeah, look, absolutely. 2021's been a good year for you. You've given us a little bit of an overview, but can you give me a bit more detail as to what 2021 actually meant to you?
Look, for me personally, it was a little bit of a repeat of 2020, but with the benefit of hindsight. So on a personal note, I actually really enjoyed that time I had with my kids, for example, at home. Even though we get frustrated by work combined with homeschooling here in Victoria, we had a lot of weeks of homeschooling our children when they're in primary school. It's particularly hard. My two daughters were in grade 1 and grade 3, so when I had them, it was certainly a challenge to work full time. But looking back, I think I wouldn't have got that time otherwise, with my kids being at home. And so for me, that's been another good thing for me personally, and I think for a lot of us working parents, professional working parents. And so it's opened up a little bit more, time for pursuits that we wouldn't, like for me personally, that was music. I used to play music, and I've gotten a bit more into that. So that's been good over 2021. But we've also seen, I guess, the challenges of working from home, of managing staff from home, and for me, it's also that teaching and mentoring side of things with junior
Mm.
lawyers, which has been
That's
harder
something,
from home.
yeah, absolutely. And that's something we've heard a few times through this series. And I agree
Yeah.
in terms of sort of junior staff and sort of just the learning and being around for that. I'd be interested to see some of the things that you might have done to try and alleviate, some of those issues.
Mm. Well, funnily enough, now that we've opened up again and we're encouraging staff to come back, we're sort of encouraging staff to come back at least 3 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
You find that the junior lawyers and the grads are the ones who are really taking up that opportunity to come into the office almost every day. They're hungry to learn. It's more the more senior practitioners that are sort of enjoying that
Mm.
flexibility that they maybe once didn't have as much of. And how have we dealt with that? Well, very good point. One of the things that we implemented at M&K was MK Chats, we call it, where we paired up randomly nationally people to have a 20-minute coffee chat virtually with someone else. So for example, I was paired
That's
up with
great.
somebody from at my office. I went and had coffee with him in person. He was a grad. I also had a coffee with someone from Sydney who I didn't know before.
Right.
And so that really, that was a bit forced, but it was so popular that we did it several times. And I think that's been one of the sort of programs we did to encourage that maybe that mentoring, getting to know each other,
Yeah.
that activity that you'd see around the office normally that we just can't have
Mm.
when we're going virtual. So
Mm.
yeah, but
It's an
I think
interesting
yeah,
time. I was going to say it's an interesting time, and I agree. And it's the sort of water cooler chats, and for us as well. See, we here in Brisbane would normally go to our Melbourne Christmas party on a Friday, which we can't do.
exactly.
Well, we probably could, but we could. We had not when we planned it.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things in terms of everyone getting together and really catching up. And I've felt that particularly in the last 18 months, not being able to sort of be in front of and be able to work closely with, even when the offices have been opened up for that transport. So I think that's a really interesting factor. I love the MK chats. That sounds like a fabulous initiative.
We didn't realize how popular it would be, but it's really good. And cements your relationship with colleagues of all different walks of life too. One of the things that we try, this is outside my role at Macpherson Kelley, but at the AMBC Victoria, we have separate chapters of the organisation in different states, and also there's a sister organisation in
Okay.
Kuala Lumpur called the
Oh, fabulous.
Malaysia Australia Business Council. So if it wasn't for COVID, we'd hardly have any interaction with the other states or anything, because we'll try to deal with our own
Of
state
course.
issues. But what we've done is managed to do joint activities and speed networking across the different councils or chambers, and that's actually been really popular. So we're keeping that going.
That's
Speed
fabulous.
networking virtually, like using Zoom and going in different rooms and meeting people. So these are
Mm.
things that I think have come out of the pandemic because of necessity, and not just with us, but with the courts, for example, with courts like the Magistrates Court,
Mm-hmm.
VCAT, who are very slow to make any changes to anything, have been forced to, and forced
Mm-hmm.
to come to terms with their technological inadequacies and to address those.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
out of challenges
absolutely.
comes opportunity. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I think, well, we've had some matters together that
we have.
probably have benefited from that in terms of petitioning creditor in Victoria,
Yeah,
debtors in Queensland, we're in
Queensland.
Queensland, you're in Victoria, we're doing, proceedings for vacant possession or what have you
Yes,
out of Queensland, but you can still be very heavily involved because of the
correct.
virtual nature of the hearings.
Correct.
And I think those are matters that probably would have to go through 2 or 3 different hands in different jurisdictions in the pre-pandemic times, whereas we've
Correct.
been able to have that continuity, haven't we? Relationship through that.
We have, and we're lucky as well with bankruptcy in that it's usually in the federal court or the federal circuit and family court of Australia, and I have to get used to that long name. But and so
Mm.
that's it's a national jurisdiction, federal jurisdiction, which means we can interact between states, and then and instead of sending somebody up or briefing somebody, we can handle it anywhere, because a lot of the hearings are currently still virtual. Of course, there's debate. Are virtual hearings better than in-person hearings? I think horses for courses. I think that for trials, you're never going to beat an in-person trial or an in-person public examination. As a practitioner, as a lawyer, hands down, has to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's a
and we've
space.
had that discussion, with some, on previous episodes of this, as well, in terms of the pros and cons there. But I do think the horses for courses, I think, goes for a lot of things. And I do agree in terms of just when you need some of the sense of occasion. I think that can be quite helpful at times when it is in person and not necessarily, virtual.
And so, like you said, for those matters we had together, it's been really good. And also just our relationship, in terms of, when you moved up to Queensland, I thought I'd miss you, but we've been able to see you and have virtual coffees and lunches together. I think it's great. So
that was never going to happen, Nat. You're never going to get rid of me that easily.
No.
Oh, that's fabulous.
No, not that we want to.
We've spoken about a few milestones, and they're probably mostly, as you said, sort of from the personal side. Do you have any from your sort of your professional side that you wanted to have a discussion about? Have you had any quite interesting matters, or anything specifically from doing your work life that you wanted to raise from a milestone point of view?
I did have a think about that, and there are some things that probably can't share yet because they're sort of still being litigated, but there are others that just haven't. I found that 2021 for my larger matters, the significant matters, have been a continuation of 2020 for some of those matters, and so they're probably not yet resolved. Like, there's one I'd love to tell you about, but we're waiting on a court judgment in which we're gist-wise, we're dealing with a creditor trying to bring an action of negligence against the liquidator. They need to leave.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
And we're acting for the liquidator, a derivative action. They're bringing in part of the company as well. There's a lot of legal issues involved. We had one, it slipped into 2020, but it's continued to...
I'll allow it.
You allow it. Where we had a creditor challenge a liquidator's remuneration.
Okay.
On the basis that the liquidator had, there'd been, I guess, there'd been a negligence, if you like. They hadn't done things. They didn't like the decisions the liquidator made, so they challenged the remuneration. Whereas, and the liquidator got up on the basis that, well, that's not a basis for challenging it under 90-15, where you have to look at the quality of the work and if the work's done. There's other avenues, so they didn't get up there. Hence, we're dealing with this now proceeding. So that's one of the interesting ones that came in the end of 2020 and was continuing to move into this year. Also, challenges of dealing with a deed administration which involved retail and several sites.
Had a couple of
those. They're always interesting when there's multiple retail sites and then trying to change over leases and there's a sale and then trying to manage that. So that's unfortunately now in liquidation, that one, but it was certainly a challenge and is ongoing. Ongoing issues that I can't necessarily talk about. So those are the sort of the flavour of the bigger matters which I've really enjoyed throughout 2021. And as well as the personal insolvency side, bankruptcy, which I do a lot of work with you on. That's always been it never ceases to amaze me the interesting things that come out of, or like that one we had the other day where someone wants to now annul a bankruptcy when the bankrupt's already been discharged for 2 years ago. And what that involves.
Yeah, that is an interesting one, isn't it? We'll have to watch this space for that one, but I reckon that there might be some room next year for you and I to get back on and have a bit of a discussion about some of the details of that matter.
I agree.
And maybe a few others that we've done with together, because I think they are super interesting, and you just need to wait till the end, don't you, before you can
I know you can look back. Yeah, exactly.
2020 hindsight, hopefully.
2020 hindsight, yeah. So I apologise that there are a number of matters I can't really tell you the outcome of yet, and share them. But
Yeah, but what I'm getting from that though is that there's been quite a lot of activity, and I think that whilst we've been, well, at least 60% down on appointments throughout the pandemic period from an insolvency perspective, both corporate and personal, I think there has still been quite a long tail of investigations 100%. And outstanding matters on files. We've definitely found that, where we've had a lot of litigation commenced. And even as recent, I was saying to someone the other day, I think I've had 4 or 5 affidavits and statements as claims just in the last 2 weeks to commence new matters within liquidations and bankruptcies. So it's a really interesting time, and I think whilst the new work has been, a little bit
slower,
not around, not existent.
Yes.
We've had quite a lot of interesting matters that we've still been able to work through. We've been really blessed with that.
Do you think, Alice, that the fact that you've been able to work, so the fact that there's been less coming in, you've been able to devote more time to thinking about matters that may have had some challenges? Is that because I agree, most of my larger, more interesting matters have really started before the pandemic, realistically, and they've just kept on rolling through, or they've peaked during the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if we've had more time. We've had more space, which has been good to sort of get things done and get them maybe done a little quicker than we might have been able to in the past. I, in particular, had a peak, a really big peak around 2017, 2018 in terms of matters for one reason or another, but I had a huge amount of appointments over those 2 years. So it was actually quite fortunate in terms of having the space to look at some of those, especially coming towards the end of the bankruptcy periods or the end of the stat limitation periods in the corporate matters, to look at those. And really, I think it was always going to be a busy time, but we did have a bit more space, that it wasn't just ridiculous, which has been thankful. Yeah, you've got to look at the bright side on certain things, don't you?
Definitely. Oh, most definitely. And I don't know about you, but I'm hopeful that, well, we are seeing a little bit more activity in the last few weeks. Just in well, we heard that the ATO had put out their first wind up 3 weeks ago now.
I laugh at this because I got an ATO wind up in May, and I thought, here we go, we're all good. The floodgates are opened. Excellent. Yes. Then nothing. And so I'm interested in the fact that we got this one in the last couple of weeks. I'm not entirely sure that there's going to be a huge amount more before April, May, but we'll wait and see.
Yeah. Do you think it'll be the election, after the election, that we see a few more trickle through?
I think so. I think who's asking the questions here, Nat?
Sorry.
I think that no. I do though. I think that we normally have the moratorium now, right? Between December and sort of February. There's not a lot that normally happens. I think then we've got a March, May election. So I think we'll wait till then. And then my personal opinion is that after that, that's when we'll start seeing a significant amount of activity. But look, we've all been looking at the crystal ball. As you said, we all had a look at what was going to happen this time last year with the influx of restructuring, and it just didn't happen. So I think it's anybody's guess. Do you have any insights on that?
I think my insights will be the same as what many people have offered, maybe even on your, can I call this a show? On your on your LinkedIn Live reflections. And that is that we've got to, at some point, there's a lot of debt out there in Australia that has to be collected. So there will be activity by the ATO, the biggest creditor in Australia, and maybe by banks at some point, although there's still, a lot of that space that the banks have been in has now been taken up by second, third tier lenders, I think, in some of that. They've filled that void a little bit. And we're seeing that space get busier, where they don't care, they're still going to enforce, and so that will drive the need for insolvency advice. It'll drive the need for appointments, and we're probably going to see it, as you say, I think, them towards the middle of next year. And that will then drive a lot more activity in our industry. And so that's kind of what I see, a bit of a sugar hit, if you like, to the insolvency sector that probably isn't needed in the economy anyway. You got to clear out that there's a place that's there for insolvency. Insolvencies are there for a reason, and and just allow creditors to collect debt more efficiently too, and drive that cash flow amongst creditors as well. So I think that'll
Absolutely.
happen probably, yeah, like you say, May. Around there, and it's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be like a wall of crashing, but it'll be an increase, and then by the end of next year, this is my prediction. Maybe we'll at least be back
come
to
back and look and see what
come
we
back and
said.
look. Yes, let's see if this is true. Where we'll have the similar levels. We'll be back to 2019 levels of appointments.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't think it's going to be a wave. I just think it's going to trickle.
No, I agree with you there. And I'm curious to see what you think. I think that it will be actually a slower, like a slower event, but over a longer period of time. I think, we were still, I've said the story before that up to the month before the pandemic hit, so basically February 2020, we had someone come and see us who were blaming the GFC for
really
the problems that they were having. Yeah,
really.
And I thought, and that was really interesting. And we thought that's fine, not knowing what was to come. But given the period of time that's lapsed between then and now, I think that this will be at least a 10-year event, and we'll be seeing appointments, in 10 plus years' time that actually had their sort of conception back during the period of the pandemic. I don't think it's going to be the tsunami or the cliff or whatever other geographic, iteration we're talking about, but I do think it's going to be prolonged over time. Do you have an opinion on that?
I would agree with you 100% actually, because you can't, firstly, even if the ATO wanted to collect debt, they couldn't do it all straight away. They don't have the resources to do that. So there's going to be a time lag between them finishing, and then there's always a time lag between that and then down the chain of people's businesses being affected by it and going to seek help. So I think it'll be a number of years and maybe a decade. I mean, it's not just debt collection and everything. It's also travel, the effect that it has on businesses. The pandemic has had an effect on every industry. I mean, industries in Victoria have been certainly, like the entertainment industry, for example, has been hurt really, really badly, right? And so there's going to be an effect, not just because of government actions and the propping up or the regulation or the non-collection, but also just the economic situation and the outflux, if you could call it that, opposite of influx of foreign workers. Well, so many, there's so many factors that this will be, like you say, a 10-year. We'll be feeling the effects of this still in a decade and talking about it, and people will be blaming COVID. I can't pay you. Why? COVID.
That's right. Exactly. And probably a very valid point. Very, very, very valid point.
Everyone's throwing the COVID card. We had, again, can't go into detail, confidential.
Of course.
This is a non-insolvency matter, but a client, big landlord client with a big, well-known tenant. We act for the landlord. The tenant just didn't want to pay their rent. They're not eligible for rent relief. They're a listed company. And but they just didn't want to pay it. COVID, the spirit of the code type thing. And but so everyone's throwing the COVID card in, even if they're making profits. So we'll be seeing and hearing this word for a long time.
I think so. We've got about 6 minutes left, so I might bundle the next two into one. I'd like to know if there's been any specific challenges or lessons that you've learned or faced out of 2021 that we haven't already discussed.
Well, we'll have touched on a few so far. I'll personally, as I said, my challenges have been homeschooling and the new roles I've taken up, particularly being managing principal of the office. But out of challenges come learnings, right? So I've really, really learned a lot what goes on behind the scenes of managing, an office and people, etc. And I'm really enjoying it. So that's certainly been a challenge. I think some of the lessons, and this, I'm sure people say this, but we've got to keep pace with trends, as employers, as businesses. And we've seen so much change happen in 2020 2021, like I said before, the courts have had to
Mm-hmm.
change. And the change in the way we work as well, and the way we interact with our employees, particularly when they're not going to get, they may not get the same amount of personal interaction. How do we deal with that? How do we put things in place to make sure that our workforce is engaged? And many people want flexibility. They always wanted it. We always had flexible working before COVID, but how? Yeah, it's become something that employees are seeking now, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
think as of right, I can work from home. And how do we address that and that balance as well between with coming into work? And yeah, so that's I think a lesson that not, I know I just spoke generally there, but there's I think it's made us innovate. Businesses have had to innovate on how they can change, like, oh, we may go online or do deliveries or whatever it is, that each business has done. Those are lessons we've come out of the challenges that we've faced
Absolutely.
throughout the last year.
Yeah, and I think we were saying that there's been like a acceleration, like the changes were all coming, but they probably weren't coming for a 10 to 15 or maybe 5 to 15 year period. However, now they've just arrived.
Suddenly they're
and
here.
We've had to deal with it. And, it is what it is. And I think we all need to figure out, I totally agree with you, what that means and the balance and the flexibility, and just be a little bit more agile, but also a little bit more understanding of what people are seeking or what they're needing in terms of their sort of employment requirements, which isn't always easy.
Yeah, exactly. Agile is the word. Humans are changeable. We're flexible. We can deal with this, and we persevere nonetheless. The other thing, just in terms of insolvency, it got me thinking. This is just me thinking on the spot now. I don't know. We've had quite a few changes, especially in 2020. Right, law reform, etc., and in 2017 those changes, which really didn't do much except regulate us more, or regulate you more. I don't think we need any more regulation, and I think that's something I think, and maybe, I think the legislature can consult with the profession a little bit more, and that's maybe a learning as well. Look at the small business restructuring regime. Yeah, it might have a place, but it's certainly not. I remember saying to you, will it go the way of this scheme of arrangement where we just talk about it in textbooks?
Exactly.
Jury's still out on that. It's there. People have taken it up, but certainly not in the numbers, that we expected.
Not as expected. And the other thing was, we've had a review this year. Well, there's ongoing review as to the safe harbour regime as well. So that's a really interesting thing that we need to look at, I think, and couple together with the small business restructuring, informal restructuring, and then more formal. So I think, if anything, the small business restructuring regime has really given a renaissance to the VA DOCA regime, because we've figured out now, I think, that certainty is actually something that a lot of creditors are craving, as opposed to, well, we're not really sure, but here, you make a decision. And so I think there's been a slight resurgence there, and there may be sort of ongoing as well. So really, really interesting, I think, things to think about. And again, I think I have to write them all down, because I think these are all conversations that we can have that I think people will be quite interested in different points of view. So we'll do that.
And totally off topic, also the hold up. I know time's finishing, but like the trading trusts and how we deal with that, and then the legislation that might be, at least they consult. They'll be interesting to see, won't it? Like it will.
But you talk about more regulation though, and you think about how we've been dealing with them for the last 25 years. Since we've dealt with sort of CVLs and Part 10s or Part VAs and DOCAs and the rest of it, and now all of a sudden we need to figure out what's different and how we're going to deal with that differently. It's an interesting one, and I think one that we'll definitely explore further. I have a few views, but that's probably for another day. But Nat, what about 2022? And we've looked at that in terms of insolvency, and whether we think that there's going to be the tsunami or the cliff, or just the gradual, death of 100 lashes. What do we think 2022? What's got in store for Nat?
In terms of insolvency?
Oh, no, just for you.
Oh, for me? Well, for me, marriage. I'm going to get married in about June or July, I think.
Excellent.
And you know what? Going overseas. I think we all need a holiday overseas. confident that borders, we can't continue with the status quo forever. We can't keep shutting down every time there's a case anywhere. And I know we're not talking about the coronavirus per se, but Omicron, maybe it's not as harsh. Maybe it's the natural way that a virus is going, that it's going to change over time, that we can be able to live with this. It's not going to go away. It's not going to be eliminated. So I'm hoping that there'll be more cross-border stuff, more international opportunities for people, and borders open up, and we get we need we need foreign workers to come into Australia at the moment. So
we do. Absolutely. Yeah. Where's the first stop for Nat? Where's the first stop when you're taking that trip overseas? What's on the top of the list?
Top of the list is Borneo in Malaysia, Sabah in Malaysia. Yes, so that's top of the list. So, and also WA, that's considered a foreign country at the moment. So, yeah. My best friend
apparently
he had a baby, and I can't visit him in Perth. So
February. That's hard, isn't it? Yeah, no, and that is hard. I think there's a lot of people that have been feeling sort of the effects of that separation as well, which has been quite tragic. But look, thank you so much for your time today, Nat. This has really been fabulous. I'm enjoying seeing everybody's different points of view, and I'm a little bit sad that this is our last session in the series today. I hope the rest of your year goes very well, and that you're able to have a good break.
Thank you.
And
thank you very much
before coming back for 2022.
And you too.
And thank you to everybody who's watching today and everyone who's joined me in the 2021 Reflection Series. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I have learned so much. Look, watch this space for similar series that might be coming into being in the future. I think Nat and I have raised but a few things that we could probably have discussions about going forward. I hope you have all a wonderful festive season and all the very best for the new year. See you then.
Merry Christmas.